Hi, Frank.
Hey, Dan, we're back at it again. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Crazy,
Good.
crazy, isn't it?
It is.
2026.
It is. It's amazing. Hope it's a good year. Yeah.
Me too. Well, I know that it's going to be a good year because, oh man, I was looking at the schedule online at a bunch of the seminars that we're offering.
Yeah.
We have all kind of stuff up there. If our listeners and viewers would like to check out the show notes, just click show more. It's going to drop down and you will see a link. That is a link tree. Just click the link tree. You will find a link to all of our seminars. You will find a link to our YouTube, to our podcast where the podcast is syndicated out. You will also find a link to our email address. If you have any kind of questions, concerns, comments, thoughts, feedback whatsoever, please feel free to go and shoot us an email. And if I could ask our listeners and viewers to do one thing, if you are listening to Apple Podcasts, if you could drop us a review. If you go all the way down, you'll see a series of stars. If you select all 5 stars, me and Dan would really appreciate that.
We sure would.
We promise we will decrease our lie telling by 20%. That's it. And if you could drop us a review, it helps the algorithms find our podcast. And if you are one of our listeners on Spotify, if you go up to the very top of your listening app, you will see a little bar at the top that says rate this show. Again, 5 stars is really, really appreciated from your friends over here. This helps the algorithm find us. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, just like and subscribe, leave a comment. It helps the algorithm know that we exist out there. So we're trying to get our footprint out there a little bit more, but that would really, really help us out.
Terrific.
That's it. Dan, we're going to be starting something that is a little bit of a new series today, right?
That's right, Frank. Want to take different types of crimes that patrol officers would come involved in, and how to adapt the Reid Technique where you're not doing a formal interview and maybe not proceeding with everything in our 9 steps of interrogation.
Exactly, yes. And if you were to go back about 2 episodes ago, you will see on episode 9 where I told an anecdotal story from when I was in the patrol division at a sheriff's department in South Carolina. This would have happened in 2011 or 2012. I responded to a domestic violence call. But whenever we had that episode up, I started to think to myself, what if we started a series? And then Dan says, Frank, that sounds like that's pretty good. What if we do a continuing series that's going to help focus more on the patrol aspect of the material that we teach? Because believe it or not, the Reid Technique, this can be adapted and applied in virtually any kind of environment imaginable. Whether you're a lawyer, you can find some of our techniques that will help you if you have to examine someone on the stand. If you're a private investigator, loss prevention, Dan, I'm sure I could go on and on and on.
Just a close fraternity brother of mine lives in Florida now. Angelo is his name. Call out to Angelo. He's also a retired police officer, a lawyer. And he said, Dan, I wish I would have had this as when doing depositions. And,
yes.
And it certainly can help in any facet of trying to elicit the truth in anywhere.
I hear that a lot. When I was up near Arlington, Virginia, giving the seminar in 2025, about half of the class were deputy prosecutors, and yes, they were, and they loved the baiting technique. They loved the bait question, Dan. They were really fascinated by it, and they said, "We're using a version of this already, Frank." So, and they really liked it. And they asked me a million questions on how to phrase it. So, the Reid So, and that's one thing that I've been continually fascinated about the Reid Technique is it's really a template that you can take it and you can apply it to whatever kind of situation that you're in. I've always said that the Reid Technique is a collection of universal principles designed to be applied subjectively. And a lot of our seminars that Dan and myself have taught, at least half of the class, maybe more, a lot of them are actually in the patrol division. For those of you who are non-law enforcement, if you were to look at a police agency, a sheriff's department, a lot of them have different units and divisions. If you get into some kind of trouble, if you see that someone is burglarizing your neighbor's house, you call 911, an officer shows up, that officer is in a uniform, a vest, he has all this stuff all over his or her belt. That person is typically going to be in the patrol division. A patrol division officer's job is to answer calls for service. If you call 911, that's the person who shows up. If you're driving down the highway, Dan, when you're speeding to your next seminar, if you see that little car hidden somewhere in the woods or in the bushes, patrol division, right? Patrol division has specialist units. You have K9 units. You have an interdiction units. You have a DUI unit. I mean, they can go on, and they can get really, really specialized. Well, as I'm teaching the seminar, as Dan is teaching the seminar, a lot of the feedback that we're getting from some of the people who have taken it is, man, I wish I would have had this in the academy, because I showed up to a fight in progress, and I realize now, looking back on the body cam, I really could have used the Reid technique as I'm questioning witnesses, evaluating the veracity of a victim, and later questioning a suspect.
Right. Absolutely, yeah.
And if you look at episode 1, where we talk about the difference between an interview and interrogation, you're going to see a little diagram that pops up over how we recommend to set up a controlled environment. But one of the biggest key variables a patrol division officer finds is really going to be two things. Number one is the crime, or the alleged crime, is typically freshly committed. It's going to be freshly committed, and the second variable is that oftentimes these crimes happen in uncontrolled environments, is what happened to them. Yeah. So very uncontrolled environments. So what Dan is going to do is Dan's going to give me an example, but we're going to be calling the series Patrol Officer Response. Today we're going to do Patrol Officer Response to Domestic Violence Call. And I would like to preface this by saying a couple of things more, Dan. And please stop me if I'm getting long-winded with this too, my friendly co-host. But
no.
The number one thing that every single road officer is going to be keeping in the back of their mind is going to be officer safety. If I say anything, if Dan says anything, and you're thinking to yourself, you know what, I don't know if that would apply in a call I had, because I was the only officer who was responding, or if anything I'm saying you think would conflict with officer safety, go with officer safety always. So when I talk about where to park, if I talked about some of the tactical ways to handle a suspect and a victim, officer safety is going to be the king of any scene that you're on.
Please let us know too.
Yes.
About anything that we're saying that you say, gosh, it wouldn't apply here, or I've had this incident occur where you're saying to do this, and maybe it might be better. We want your suggestions as well, not just your questions, but how to improve this.
Exactly, yes. And a lot of the examples that I'm going to be giving, I've responded to calls for service, armed robberies. I've responded to a homicide before, plenty of domestic violences, CSEs, criminal sexual conduct, if you're from South Carolina, burglaries, just your regular 911 calls when I was in the patrol division. The examples that I'm going to give is going to be an amalgamation of those calls in it.
That means, what's that big word?
Yeah,
how many syllables does that have?
That big word, amalgamation, Whoa. That means I'm going to take an element from this one, I'm going to take an element from this one. I ended up getting a bunch of my old police reports from the sheriff's department, and I'm flipping through them and looking. And what I was running into, Dan, was, well, this domestic violence call would be a great example of separating out the witnesses, but because of the context, I just didn't get a chance to interview everyone. Well, this one over here, I could interview everybody, but it eventually got cut short because we had a higher priority call that ended up breaking out. So I'm taking elements out of those real cases, and I'm going to talk about for the learning purposes of just how to apply the Reid technique in a patrol officer response is all it is. But
perfect.
These examples are grounded in the real world. And what Dan brought up is a really great point. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from your real world experiences ways you think the Reid technique can help you, but also those hard cases where you're going, you know what, guys, I don't know how in the world I can apply any of your technique to what I do because it's such a niche part of law enforcement. We would love to hear from you, so I invite you to come in. So officer safety. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, okay, no. Let's start out with then using the example of a domestic violence case. Is that
okay? Yes, using the example of a domestic violence. As I said before, officer safety overall. The second preface, though, I wanted to have before we talk about our example is if I say anything that would conflict with your policy and procedures, guess what you're going to do? You're going to go with your policy and procedures, okay?
Absolutely.
And I understand that around the nation, when I say interview and interrogation, your local jurisdiction may have different laws with that, or laws concerning juveniles, Miranda. I'm going off of what we do here in the Southeast. Okay, the Southeast is going to be pretty much Virginia down through South Carolina, Florida, snaking all the way until like parts of Texas. That's the area of law enforcement I am most familiar with. So there's going to be an advantage to my knowledge, but there's also going to be a limitation to my knowledge. I just want to freely admit that up front so we know exactly where my information's coming from.
Perfect, Frank.
All right,
Absolutely.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, so what do we got, Dan? What kind of call am I responding to?
Well, let's see. How about let's take it for a domestic violence case.
Okay, domestic violence case.
Yeah, that's football season. Can bring that on. A lot of sports activities at home. People drinking, people arguing. I read about a guy who killed his wife not too long ago. He shot her, killed her because she asked him to turn off the San Francisco 49er game.
Oh man, I read a statistic years ago that said that the Super Bowl is one of the most dangerous times for interpartner violence out there. They say that it's
I believe it. Yeah.
Yes, very, very dangerous time. There's a lot of movement, a lot of folks are visiting, there's alcohol, there's drugs, intense emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so whenever we talk about domestic violence, I would like to define our terms very, very briefly. Now, when I was in law enforcement, the very last domestic violence legal update I had would have been in the later part of 2023. However, I have since kind of moved on past that. I haven't had a legal update since, but I still like to keep myself abreast of it. There is a fundamental difference between, let's say, a fight between two people, a disagreement, and a domestic violence according to the law. A domestic violence is basically intimate interpersonal violence between two parties. As we were taught at the academy, if you're sleeping with the person and you get into a physical altercation or a verbal altercation involving threats, that's domestic violence. In certain states around the Union, all 50 states and territories, I've noticed that they have different definitions for what constitutes a household member. Sometimes it's just children. Some of them it's not children. Some of them it's, hey, are you living with the person but you're not married? You're a household member. Some of them it isn't. But for the example that I'm going to give for domestic violence. One other thing. So the law not only recognizes this is a particular type of crime, but there's different kind of elements that need to be there in order for you, our responding officer, to develop probable cause for an arrest. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, but mainly from the perspective of using the Reid technique whenever you show up somewhere. But for example, if you run their NCIC background, if they have prior convictions, not charges, but convictions for domestic violence, that could be an enhancement. So if you do show up on scene and you run someone's name, they may have an incentive to be deceptive with you. But let's start off like this. Let's assume for a moment that I'm in my police cruiser, okay? And my call sign, it chirps out over the radio. They report a domestic violence in progress. Now, the example that I'm going to give for the listeners and viewers is this. A male subject and female subject, husband and wife, both parties are on scene. Female subject is locked outside of the house. Male subject is inside of the house. The female subject is a complainant. She's called in the call. She says that the husband assaulted her and she's bleeding. So we have multiple units now. We're probably going to be en route to the call, including myself. So I'm going to listen to some backup as we're approaching the property. EMS emergency services are going to be heading there as well, but they're going to hold off on the scene until the scene is secure. especially if you're a fireman, right? And if you know, you know. So whenever I show up on scene, the very first thing that I would do, Dan, is I would cut my lights and siren off, probably about a block or 2 blocks away from it, in case somebody is waiting to ambush me on the property. You never know if the call
could be a setup call. Correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So I would turn off my lights and sirens. I would tactically approach the house where the domestic violence call has come out. And I would like to emphasize that this is going to be a house. It's not going to be a duplex, a condo, or an apartment, but a freestanding house. Normally, what I was taught to do in law enforcement is you didn't want to just go and pull up in their driveway and go right up to their front door, because then you were just a sitting target. Someone could start popping rounds at you from the second floor. You could be ambushed on your flanks. It wasn't a good idea. Plus, you wanted to be able to use your car to fall back to for covering concealment in case you needed it. But what I would do is, as I parked a little bit ways away from the house, or there's some offset, I would get out, I would listen, I would see if I could identify anything around. If someone was in the front yard, a lot of times I'll just give them verbal commands to come back to me, right? Because I wouldn't just want to go up, just walking up, especially a long driveway, a bunch of windows, plenty of places to ambush me. But let's assume that I show up, I scan for officer safety, I scan for threats, I don't see any. I'm radioing out what I see and hear. I tell them that I see a female subject, blah, blah, blah. I approach her. I immediately ask this person, is there anyone else in the house? Or where's your husband? If she's the one who called it in, she identifies that he's inside the house. And this is the point where, if you know, this is where the call can turn into an SHIT storm. The husband can just come bursting out of the house, yelling and shouting. They could start fighting. You could have neighbors and family. It can get crazy really fast. And I cannot emphasize to you how what a turd sandwich a domestic violence call can turn into. But for simplicity's sake, let's just assume there's 2 parties, which there's almost never, right? So we're not going to worry about juveniles or witnesses or anything. So the first thing I would do is I would get my victim. I'd probably order her to go back off a little bit. I'm going to stand off of the door and try and get hands on anyone who's inside of the door behind it. Okay, and and let's assume that the husband cooperates. He comes out of the house. At this point, I'm going to put him in handcuffs for officer safety until I figure out what the heck is going on. And then I'm going to hold the scene down, now that I have eyes on the subjects, until other officers show up. When other officers show up, and this is where officer safety is going to come in, my friends, I don't want to start questioning everyone involved in a domestic violence. Now, this is just me talking. Feel free to do it however you want, unless there's another officer on point to watch my back. Because if I'm talking to Dan on a scene, what could someone be doing behind me, right? Ying, ying, ying. They could come up. So if you begin to talk to people, hold off on it. Don't ask what happened. Just ask if anyone needs EMS. Let EMS know the scene's secure. Do whatever you have to do to get medical aid to people. But make sure you have someone watching the house and someone watching your back when you begin to conduct these interviews. Okay? Because one of the core concepts, and this is what me and Dan were trying to articulate, is controlling the environments where the interview or interrogation is going to be, trying to control as much of those variables as possible. And if you don't control the scene, if they're walking around, they're doing this and that, then it's going to be a cluster, you know what. So the very first thing I would like to do is I would like to take the person who called us, in this case the female victim, walk her away from the scene so that she's not within eyesight or earshot of the suspect.
Make sure her back is facing.
Make her back is facing.
You're the one that she focuses on, no one else.
Yes, exactly, yes. Sometimes what I used to do is I would actually put them in my car. I would drive a block away if I noticed a bunch of nosy neighbors, right? Always 2 officers, especially if it's a male and female, body cam rolling, all that stuff, fellas, right? And then what I would do is I would get her out of the car if she could stand up. I never liked doing interviews in a car. I always hated it. And I would try and get her out where I can view her. And I don't want anything between me and the person I'm talking to. So I'm going to get her to stand up. We go outside. Let her lean against the hood of your car if she needs to, or if he needs to. Body cam is rolling. I can see the person from their head all the way down to where their toes are. As a matter of fact, that's almost easier than having them sit down. What I've learned in domestic violence, my friends, is I would recommend, you don't have to do it. And if you're saying, oh, Frank, that sounds like the biggest BS, I'm never going to do something like that, don't do it. But I would go and Mirandize everybody I talk to at a domestic, because if you know, you know. A victim today, and then they're a suspect 2 minutes later. You never know what's going to happen.
What's your experience as far as, I guess the big thing about Miranda is the fear that the person's now going to say, I'm not going to talk to you, I want a lawyer. From your experience and other officers, how often does they ask for a lawyer in situations like that?
So the fear that if you read someone out their Miranda rights, or if you verbally articulate their Miranda rights, that the person is going to clam up and not talk.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, police officers, and I'm speaking from my own experience here, that fear is bigger in your head than it is in the real world. If you're dealing with a victim who's a victim of a violent crime, severe trauma, a rape victim, domestic violence, robbery victim, if you read them out their Miranda rights, it's almost like it grounds them a little bit. It calms them down a little bit. And I've never had a victim or witness invoke their right to silence. Yes, I've never had that. But what can happen is that you could talk to a victim, and let's suppose that she's a legitimate victim of domestic violence. But then when you go inside the house to get the baseball bat that her boyfriend beat the shit out of her with, you go into her bedroom and you discover her pot farm. You discover her crack. You discover her heroin. And now I'm in a situation where I got inside of the house to get evidence based on a statement that she told me. So when I back out of the house and I get a search warrant, my search warrant is now based on a statement that she freely gave me. And
Excellent
what can happen
advice.
in court is a defense attorney can say, well, she was really in custody. I mean,
Correct.
and then, so Mirandize them. And that's something else I would say to officers. Forget the consent to search forms. Get a search warrant. Use a consent to search form just to work the scene if you're a patrol officer. But if you're doing the follow-up investigation, get a search warrant and go back to the scene, retake all those pictures, and re-interview anyone who you have to, because a lot of times what these victims and witnesses will do is they'll show up to court, they've made up with the suspect, and they'll say they never actually gave you permission to search their house, and the defense can make a motion to suppress the consent to search form, and then there goes half of your evidence right there. So search warrant, Miranda has always been how the veteran cops have taught me when I was coming up in law enforcement. But
excellent advice.
And something else is that you don't have to have your Miranda form be this long thing like, an entire page. Just verbally give them out their Miranda. Soft Miranda's better than anything. It's not going to be as offensive. A lot of times the academy has a little card. Just read it out. Most of the time you don't have to worry about this with a victim or a witness. Now, if you're saying, Frank, hold on a second, I did that and then this negative thing happened, me and Dan want you to send us an email. Send us an email. Let's talk about it, and let's see what kind of personal input me and Dan can give you. But I would get the person out of my car, get them to the front of the car, read them out their Miranda rights very briefly, and all I'm looking for is, does the person need medical assistance? Which I wouldn't have drove them there if they needed it to begin with. I'd let EMS handle it before. But I would ask them again, how do you feel? Do you feel like you can make a statement? I asked you before if you need some EMS, would you like to go? Okay. And then what I'm going to do is start to apply the Reid technique. Already, I've taken my subject away from the other people. I've eliminated the distracting factors as best as I can.
Now, Frank, you're referring to the victim, correct?
Yes,
right
I am.
now?
Yes,
okay.
I am.
Okay.
And then what I would do is just ask them a series of baseline questions. And if you're a responding officer, you already do this. You ask them what their name is. You ask them their date of birth, where they live, and try and start to get the elements of a crime. What's her relationship to the suspect? Is there anyone else who lives in the house? Were there any children present? Does she have any children in common with this person? Once I get that basic baseline biographical data out, now I'm applying another format of the Reid technique, and that's going to elicit the alibi account. just ask her what happened. Say, hey, what happened tonight?
Now,
just
Frank,
ask her what happened. Get that initial
would you at
statement.
this point, even before that, would you ask them, have they consumed any alcohol or drugs, or is that something that you want to bring up maybe or talk about later with the, let's say, with the victim?
So you can, either way's good. And this goes back to something I was going to bring up as well. It would be really good. I used to have a domestic violence checklist. And as a matter of fact, I think I have it on an old thumb drive. I would print out a piece of paper, and if I was interviewing someone, I actually had a checklist. Miranda, yes or no. Basic biographical data for the baseline of Reid, and then I would ask them about drugs, about alcohol, just to kind of assess where the person was. I would ask that before you ask the alibi question, just to make sure that I'm dealing with someone who's cognizant. Now, if you're dealing with a domestic violence, my friends, after 8 p.m., the answer is going to be yes and yes for drugs and alcohol. You just have to assess to what degree the person is going to be buzzed up or drunk, okay?
Right.
But what I'm going to do is I say, hey, tell me what happened. And they know exactly what you're talking about. And that's when excited utterances are going to start to spill forth from your victim. What I'm looking for from someone who's being truthful with me is a victim. And let's think about the last time you responded to, let's say, a traffic accident. And you talk to a witness or someone, you say, okay, tell me how this accident happened. Well, I was driving my car, and then all of a sudden, I looked over, and then he ran the red light, and then this, and then this, and then this. I'm looking for those 3 channels of communication that lets me know if my victim's being truthful, just one of the indicators, right? Verbally, does she answer my questions in a direct manner? Non-verbally. Now, in the very beginning, a victim's probably going to be like this, but as she articulates, closed off, but as she articulates the attack, as I have the right attitude, posture, and tone of voice of a responding officer, she'll start to square the hips and shoulders towards me, right? Instead of having a bladed stance like she's looking for cover and concealment, she's going to have more frontal alignment with me. She'll start using her hands. One of the things that I teach that I've noticed about deceptive subjects is they may take their hand and it makes a point, but then it quickly retreats into the starting position. With victims of domestic violence, sexual assaults, and violent crime, their hands will go out and make a point. It may not be like really dramatic, but their hand will kind of hang out here for a little bit.
And it gradually increases the openness.
Gradually increases. Whereas deceptive subjects, they'll make a point, and then, officer, that's why I would not lie to you. And then their hands immediately retreat back into the castle, immediately retreats back to the starting position. All those little things which you can learn by attending a seminar with either Dan, me, or some of our other incredible seasoned instructors, you can learn too. Link in the show notes. Just go to our website, sign up, right? Sign up for a Dan. I've already got enough classes this year. But that's what I am looking at. That's what I'm assessing. What's really important is that I have another officer watching the entire thing behind me. Find someone that doesn't care about interviews and interrogations. You don't want someone who's going to be following along the conversation. I want someone who's watching my back, watching the victim's hands, watching their hands, right? Making sure that I'm safe throughout this interaction. But the very first thing I'm going to ask would be eliciting the alibi account. Tell me what happened, right? Tell me what happened, let's say about 45 minutes before I got here. Or tell me how we got here right now. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for detail in her story that's consistent, Dan. I'm looking for anchor moments. Well, I was at Ned's bar, and I may have been flirting with a guy. It was around 7:20 p.m. I know it was 7:20, and I'm looking for illustrators, right? Because I got a notification on my phone from my crazy husband, and I had to keep telling him. I'm looking for those anchor moments, those illustrations. When I get her side of the story, then what I'm going to do is I would throw out just a few behavioral questions. Not a lot to try and draw out the interview, but just enough to say, okay, will she give me any other intel about the subject? I might say something like, well, if it turns out at the end of this investigation, if Joey really did punch you in the face and shove you down the porch steps, what do you think should happen to him? Right? And I can tell you this, with domestic violence, you kind of have to be a little careful, because a lot of times the dynamics between the victim and suspect can be a little screwed up. At this point, she could do one or two things. She could go very harsh punishment, or she may go lenient punishment, and both of them could be truthful responses. But let's suppose she says, well, he needs to go to jail because he shoved me down. I'm probably going to leave it at that in the interview, and I'm going to go talk to my suspect. But let's suppose that she gives me an answer like, well, I mean, I don't think you should go to jail for what he did. I might ask a follow-up question and say, oh, yeah, why is that? And if she says, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know why you're here. Does she say that, or does she say, because I don't work and he works, and we're going to lose our house if he gets fired over this? That could be a legitimate answer from a victim of domestic violence. But it's a way for me to kind of overall assess the veracity of the story that I'm getting. It's just another data point for me. I might throw in a bait question. I might just kind of size the person up, right?
Now, Frank, as this is going on, obviously let's just assume in our example, the husband, is he being questioned by someone as well, or does the other officer who's kind of watching him kind of watch him and just try to calm things down, where he's not really trying to tell me what happened as you're talking to the victim?
So I can tell you the way it's supposed to be, Dan, but here's more than likely what's going to happen, right? Yep. As I am interviewing the complainant or victim first, the suspect is going to start to get a little bit antsy, nervous, and anxious, okay? And he's going to try and start to build a rapport and build up a dialogue with whoever is watching him. And he's going to start saying, I mean, you need to tell your friend over there or your boss over there, blah, 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 blah. So he's going to be talking to someone over there. Honestly, I don't worry about that. Whenever I go back, I don't talk to an officer to ask what he said. I'm not going to talk to EMS and say they said what it is. And this is where, if you are the responding officer, my friends, and this is your scene, you need to be the scene person in charge, okay? You're going to have officers come up, EMS come up, neighbors, and they're going to... Now, if the neighbor saw something, talk to them and interview them. But when your squad mates come up to tell you what the person says, be nice to them and polite, but say, okay, all right, I'll talk to you later. Can you bring him over here to me really quick? And don't worry about what he told someone else. It's really immaterial on the scene at that point. I bring the other person over there where I have the victim. The victim's been escorted somewhere else. At this point, to help build up rapport, I may remove them from the handcuffs if officer safety permits it. Now, if this person is 6'8", Dan, and he weighs 340 pounds, and he looks like he could pick me up with one hand, I'm probably not going to take him out of there. And what I like to do when I lean them up again, whenever I take the person away from the victim, I take them away from everything. It's just me and the suspect and someone else. I will sit there in silence for about 30 seconds and just observe the person. What do? Do they immediately attack my credibility? Are they attacking the victim? Are they sitting there in silence looking at me? That's the one that would make me most uneasy, right? If they sit there in silence, I'm like, okay, I've got someone who's smarter than your average bear, right? This is going to take some brain power with that one. But I bring them over there, Mirandize them, even if they've been Mirandized again, and then at this point, ask a few of those suitability for the interviews. Hey, how do you feel? Hey, do you need anything real quick? Is there anything I can get you? A lot of times, and this is where I might go off base just a little bit off of the Reid, a suspect may want a cigarette and they may want a vape. What I have found in this particular environment is their request for a cigarette or vape is different than if they show up in a controlled environment. If they show up in a controlled environment in an appointment, an attempt to vape or do a cigarette is just so they can distract themselves and think of something to say or launch a countermeasure against you or to interrupt the pacing and flow of the conversation. But if it's been freshly committed, Dan, I have found that requests for cigarettes or vaping is actually an honest request. And when I don't grant that request, I found that their anxiety and stress will often peak to such a degree that it can actually make the interview difficult, and I may have to decondition the person. So,
and that's really a good point, Frank, in the sense that with the Reid technique, you're right. We do, in a controlled environment, we do teach try not to have anything of a distraction, water, coffee cups, pens, in the controlled environment. But with the Reid technique, it's nice because there are going to be exceptions to everything.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
if you found something, even in a controlled environment, if you found something that we present has worked for you and you see no downside to it and you've had good success, don't change it because we're suggesting you do it another way.
Exactly.
You adapt to the circumstances you're under, but that's a good point. It's really helping establish, again, that rapport with the individual.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely, yeah, and it isn't just rapport, but now I'm not a medical doctor or anything. I'm not a psychologist, but
thank goodness.
But yeah, I know, right there, man, my medical liability would be through the roof, Dan. But their request for a cigarette or a vape is often them honestly trying to control their stress and anxiety,
right?
Because if they don't do it, then they can't hear you. Then they're not going to be able to respond to the questions effectively. And if I have to interrogate the person, it's like they get kind of loopy. So if they ask for water, I'll give them water. If they ask for a cigarette, I'll let them smoke a cigarette. I used to have what I called my felon pack in my car. I had I had a marbles and I had a pack.
You could get that on eBay too.
That's
if
right.
You subscribe the felon pack there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know what? We should brand out. Well, I don't know. That's a tobacco. Then the I was going to say Reid felon pack of cigarettes. That would be a good gag gift. But I had a lighter. I had some cigarettes in there. I was never a vapor. I'm not a vapor today. I mean, I don't even understand how it works. But if they wanted a cigarette, I could give them a cigarette. That would help a little bit with rapport building. But I've always been one to avoid building a base of rapport with the suspect because I'm doing nice things for them. I've often found that classes that teach doing nice things for them, like, well, you bring them in a little hot cup of coffee and the warmth causes them to blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Oftentimes, I end up just playing the suspect's game and they don't play my game.
That sounds screwy.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Oh, gosh, man. But so I do stuff like that to avoid having to decondition the subject later on. Mm-hmm. And what I'll do is I'll ask non-threatening questions as they're smoking the cig. I'll say, okay, man, so tell me where you're from, blah, blah, blah. Where'd you go to high school? Oh, really, you did? I had no idea. You know what? It's kind of funny. My father flies airplanes as well. Oh, man, you're in the military? Look, I never served myself, but my brother served in the military. What division were you in? Oh, and I'll start making small talk with them smoking the cigarette. And then when it's time to ask the hard questions, that's when I say, okay, sir, I'm going to ask you to put the cigarette out now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you to put the vape over there on the hood. Thank you. Now I've removed the distractors. They've been deconditioned. And that's when I'll say, okay, hey, man, tell me. I'm going to tell you what I'm looking at right now, Joey. What I'm looking at is this. We know that Mary was injured tonight. The question for me is, were her injuries intentionally inflicted by you, or was she just drunk as a skunk and she fell down the steps? Now, so far, my investigation, if you did cause those injuries, my investigation will show that. If, however, Joey, you did not cause those injuries and this really was an accident, well, my investigation will show that as well. But I'm going to ask you straight up now, Joey, did you cause the injuries on Mary? A direct question. So basically, what do we call that, Dan? We call that the what?
The you question.
The you question. That's it. We call it the you question.
And they're 99% of the time going to tell you, no, it was an accident. She fell. She was drunk. She stumbled.
So here, Dan, I'm going to drop a nuclear bomb on you. Okay?
Okay.
This is so. Patrol officers, if you're listening to this, or maybe you took our course and you're thinking, man, I'm not going to interview anyone in a room in a controlled environment. You have an advantage that the regular detectives and investigators don't have, is that the crime was freshly committed. They don't have as much time to think of countermeasures against you. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they will admit to what they did right there on the scene.
It surprises me. Now,
99% of them will say, no, I did not do it in a controlled environment. I don't have any hard numbers, but I'm willing to bet it's probably around only 70% are going to say, no, I did not, at the actual scene of the crime in an uncontrolled environment. The reason for that is they're going, oh, God, what did I do? Oh, gosh, you know what? This officer's kind of nice. Well, yeah, I intentionally, I did it, man. I did it. A lot of times
they haven't prepared their story, so to speak, yet.
They haven't prepared their story. And I'll tell you this, a lot of times those emotions are real. The anger, the rage, the hate, the lust. If you look at motivating factors that we have for assaults and homicides in our class, we list a lot of those motivating and factors that are around it. If you're in an environment like that, your math is a little bit off. 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. It equals 4 plus 1. And that's what I will often tell a lot of the students in the seminars. I say, look, don't worry about Miranda. If somebody shows up for an appointment to talk to the police, their math is already off. They're not playing with the full deck, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the math may be off just a little bit. 2 plus 2 equals 4.01. But the more questions you ask, the more their math is going to be kind of screwed up, the more mistakes that person's going to make. And a lot of times, if that crime is violent enough, personal enough, and there's some trauma involved, a lot of times your suspect, you could get an admission right there on the side of the road.
Right. We call that kind of the impulse offender.
The impulse offender, that's right. But let's assume for a moment that Joey has done this before. Let's assume that as I'm talking to him, I hear dispatch say, Central 204, are you secure? That means, hey, he probably has a record. He might have an active warrant. And suppose dispatch tells me that he has prior convictions for DV with this victim. And then I'm thinking, okay, all right. So then I go back to Joey. And then that's when I'm pretty much going to just start asking him standard investigative questions, alibi questions. So, Joey, tell me, what happened here tonight? I would probably ask that one towards the very front of it. Tell me what happened tonight. And just let him tell you what he said. Let's suppose Joey says, well, I was wondering where my wife is. She's always, effing around on me. I knew she was talking to some guy at the bar. And I texted her and asked her where she was. Oh, really? When about was this? I don't know, around 7 p.m. And I'm thinking, okay, that collaborates what the victim told me. So mentally, I'm giving my victim a little green check mark. And I'm going to look to see how close his story is to what the victim says. And then he says, and then she got home, officer, and she was just drunk. She's stumbling around. So I locked the door. And I said, if you're going to cheat on me, you're not going to go into the house I built with my own 2 hands. But I did not touch her. I swear to God, I swear on a stack of Bibles, I did not touch her. And I'm looking at this verbal, right? I'm like, okay, they're kind of selling this to me real strong.
Right.
He starts doing what we in law enforcement call the felon stretch, right? I did not do it, and now he's stretching and he's looking around. That's anxiety starting to spike in him, right? And he says, I was inside the house, and she starts stumbling away, and she fell down the stairs outside on the front porch, right? So her side of the story is he came outside, beat the shit out of me. His story is, hey, I stayed inside, and she just fell down. Well, then what I'm going to do is just part and parcel, ask more investigative questions. What's your relationship with her? How long have you been married? Has something like this ever happened before? Has she ever fallen down and suffered injuries before? Hey, Joe, have you ever said something to her that you later regretted? Hey, Joe, have you ever, and I'm not saying that, you did this tonight, but have you ever previously maybe gotten into an argument with her, or maybe she was smarting off with you, and maybe you just pushed her a little bit, or maybe you just, just popped her a little bit. I'm not saying that you would ever do hand and fist, but maybe you just popped her or something just to, make her be quiet and stop yourself from doing something worse. There's different ways of doing it. I'm going to ask all these questions coming at this person from different angles. I'm looking for emotional and psychological vulnerabilities that he could betray to me, right? I might ask him the motivation question. Well, now, Joey, I'm not saying that you did this, but why do you think, let's say a husband would cause some injuries to his wife after an argument? And suppose Joey breathes in and breathes out, and he says, well, if she was cheating on him, it doesn't make it right, but maybe if the husband was drinking and he found out that she was cheating on him, and I smell alcohol on his breath.
Yes.
And I pretty much know.
These are all themes that you're trying to elicit that you will later use. Yeah.
Exactly, that's right. So I would do just, if you've attended our class, we've got we've got questions. We've got all kind of stuff in here. We could go over every single one of them. We don't have to do that, of course. But we have all kind of stuff, and I'm just going to show something really quick for our people. But in our seminars, we've got some good stuff. I don't know if you can see it. I'll make sure that it's not too blurry. But this is the front of the book. You're going to get a book like this, and you're going to get a checklist of questions to ask these suspects. You're not going to have to think of them on your own. And what you could do if you're a patrol division officer is you can create a cheat sheet, right? You can have a cheat sheet for domestic, just 8 or 10 questions for a domestic, a cheat sheet, 8 or 10 questions for a robbery, Dan, maybe this is something Reid could produce one day in the future, kind of help out our people on, on the forces. But
right. And, Frank, just one thing you just mentioned, it made me think of this too, is that if you're asking the husband these questions, well, we've gotten into arguments before, and I had a few drinks tonight, and she had much more than I had. I think it's a good idea for the investigator, and correct me if I'm wrong, not to say, well, is that why you hit her? Is that why you did this? Because now you've just, again, switched out of the interview into an interrogation, and you want to avoid the process of going back and forth, interview, interrogation, in that you're just prolonging the whole process and making it more difficult.
100%, Dan.
Okay.
100%. And when I was responding to domestic violence calls, I did that all the time without really knowing it.
Yeah.
If you're one of our former seminar attendees, you probably had a moment in Dan's class, my class, Mike's class, anyone's class who you had in 2025, where you said, "Oh man, I was doing that. I don't know if I should have done that." We've all been there.
It's a shortcut you're trying to take, but most of the time, it'll probably work a few times, but we're looking at things that are designed to make it work all the time.
Yeah. So you want to keep your questions non-accusatory because we're doing an interview. And if you look at episode 1, you can look at where we talk about the difference between an interview and an interrogation. Dan brought up a really, really good point. And this is why I think, Dan, you were a police officer in another life, a frustrated, grizzled, salty field training officer with a bunch of rookies in your car. But it's very tempting if they say something.
I was more the Car 54, where are you type with Tootie and Muldoon. You probably have to look that up on Meet TV, Frank.
Well, to kind of date my age, I'm 42 now, but I was at a seminar in Michigan, and I was telling the class about, whenever you pull up in your Crown Vic, and I had a couple hands go up, and they said, "A Crown Vic?" And now, luckily, there's enough other people in the class that they were able to laugh at them and say, you never rode in a Crown Vic. But I've got a feeling as the years go on, if I bring up a Crown Vic, I'm just going to get a bunch of eye stares at me.
I know we're getting off the topic. When I was in Dubai, they're driving not a kid, Porsches, Land Rovers. It's just amazing. But
here's the advantage of a Porsche. You can hot seat those things. You can keep them running for a week without having to turn them off. Whereas if you're an agency and you're doing a police cruiser, the Ford, the Interceptor, the Focus, the SUVs, you can't really hot seat those things because the starter and alternator just burns out on them. But with the Porsche, a lot of those countries will use them and they'll hot seat them and they'll rotate them through divisions and all. But But kind of going back to what we're talking about, a lot of times, and this isn't just roadside, interviews. I've been doing a controlled interview with someone, and I said, "Hey, why do you think a grown adult would have sexual contact with a minor?" And the person says, "Well, if it happened to them in the past, maybe they're just reenacting what happened to them." And then in the interview, I'm going, "Did it happen to you?" I'm like, but then I've tipped my hand. Right, I've tipped the hand of that line of questioning.
Tempting, but don't do that.
Very, very tempting. Yeah, so just ask questions, keep it case focused, and let's suppose though that he gives a lot of indications. Well, let's suppose the story that he gives me. Okay, I'm gonna let him tell me what happened uninterrupted. Then I'm gonna go back. Now, the whole time this is happening, I've got my notes out. Okay, I've got my notes out. I'm writing stuff down. I have another officer watching my back, and I'm going to say, okay, You said that you sent her a text at 7 p.m., right, Joey? Yeah, that's right. Could you show me the text message if I asked for it? Well, yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, I'll give a check mark to that. That's something that I can substantiate. Let's go to the part where she was on the front porch. Did you actually see her fall? Yeah, I did. Okay, where were you when you saw her fall? Well, I was in the kitchen. Okay, where in the kitchen? I was by the stove, and I'm looking for hesitation. Right. I'm looking for him to become more and more uneasy. And what you'll find with a lot of them, freshly committed, very traumatic, is they'll say, well, I don't know, she just fell. Well, where were you when you knew that she fell? How did you know she fell down? I'm going to ask a bunch of those little detailed follow-up questions. And what you're going to find with someone who's deceptive is, in general, they're just not going to have a lot of detail. Well, I don't know, she just fell. Well, I heard her screaming. I don't know. Well, she was just there. And if I get a lot of indicators like that, and I'm looking at him, there's no injuries on Joey, I'm looking at her, she was clearly assaulted. And then at that point, as a law enforcement officer, you have a couple of decisions to make, okay? I would talk to my supervisor, and here's what I would tell my supervisor. I would say, look, I just heard back from dispatch, they ran his NCIC. He has 2 prior convictions for domestic violence. He has 1 pending in Richland County, the jurisdiction over from us. He has prior convictions. This is going to be an elevated charge. This might be something where your on-call investigator would just want you to take him to the jail. But me, if you're a go-get-em police officer, I'm going to tell my supervisor this. I'm going to say, here's what I would like to do. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to, what I conducted right now was an interview. But what I'm about to do now is I'm going to conduct an interrogation of this person. And then I'm going to walk through exactly what I'm going to do, right? Tell my supervisor what you want to do. It's really important. I was going to say guys and girls, but law enforcement pros out there, that you don't want to get so wrapped up in what you're doing that you don't tell the other officers around you what you're doing. Because if you walk away from that person, your person who's doing cover may take the suspect, put them back in handcuffs, and drive away. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. So you want to make sure that you're either telling a supervisor or you have someone who's going to be a liaison to everyone else around you so you can conduct the business that you need to conduct. Again, own the scene. It's your scene. If you were the first officer that responded to it in most jurisdictions, just command the scene. And that's easier. It's both easier said and it's also easier done, because most of the time nobody wants to take responsibility for a domestic violence scene, okay? Armed robberies are very different because they typically are cut and clean, but no one wants to have their hands dirtied in something like that. So tell your boss, tell someone else what you're about to do and what to expect. I would go back over to the person. And I would walk up to them. Now, the person is at the front of my car. They're sitting there, right? I'm going to walk back up to them, and then I'm going to say, Joey, I've just talked to everyone out here on scene. I've gathered up all the evidence, and here is what the investigation has concluded, Joey. It's concluded that you are responsible for causing Mary to have the injuries that we see over there. This was no accident. She didn't accidentally fall down. And then what I'm going to do, Dan, is I'm going to step back a little bit and just assess, kind of size up what Joey's response is.
Don't be surprised with that, the silence on the individual.
Exactly, that's right.
Everyone is fearful of all that's going to elicit a strong denial. You'd be amazed
it almost
the
never
silence
does.
you get. And what is that telling you? You're absolutely correct.
Exactly. And I'm telling you, their math is going to be off because they're criminals. I have a theory, Dan, and I was never able to pursue it on an academic level, but I think that when somebody commits a crime, there's a dual trauma that happens. A trauma to the victim, obviously, and we want to make all of our law enforcement victim-centric, right? But there's also another trauma that's done to the person who commits the crime, and that's the criminal, in that their perception of the world is off a little bit now. They're going to start, the software of their mind is going to be a little bit flawed. 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. It equals 4.01. And that's when they start making irrational decisions. For example, why they will escalate, why they will repeat, until they're caught, why they will show up and talk to you, why you will say, hey, I think you really did it, I don't think this was an accident, and why they'll sit there in silence and stare at you. And they're playing with a different deck. Yeah.
Right, and most people that do commit crimes have justified what they did.
Exactly. And that's going to lead into, hey, Dan or Joe, you know what? You're probably asking yourself, well, if Officer Shumpert, hey, you know what? You don't have to call me. Just call me Frank. How about that? All my friends call me Frank.
Perfect.
All the guys, they all call me Frank. As a matter of fact, I see that, hey, are your hands hurting? What if I take those handcuffs off of you for just a little bit? And now only do it if you have someone watching you, right? Officer safety, all that. Wonderful opportunity to take the handcuffs off. Let them go like this, and then you say, hey, we know that we know that you did it, and there's different ways that you can handle it. What I typically did on the road was, hey, what I'm going to be asked by my boss is, are you going to do something like this again?
And Frank, let me just interject here. The thing to remember from the investigator is when they say that is don't say to the subject, why did you do it?
Exactly. Yes.
You give them the various scenarios.
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you this. If you're listening to this, you're a patrol officer, a seasoned vet, or someone who's new, or maybe you stumbled across our channel, you're just curious about law enforcement. Let me say this. If you make a mistake, it's better to make a mistake, an honest mistake, earnestly trying to discharge your duties as a law enforcement officer, than sit back and not do anything at all. Any mistake I've made in law enforcement has been because I was giving it my all, even if I was unsure of myself. And no one's going to criticize you if you have a misstep, if you say something like, oh, well, why'd you do it? But Dan brings up a real good point. We know that you did it. There needs to be something in there called a transition statement. Dan, can you explain what the transition statement is?
You're going from that accusatory statement that we know that you did it to now going into giving them a social, moral justification for what they did. Never legal justification for what they did. And but they need to know from your standpoint where you're coming from, that you have absolutely no doubt that they did it. But again, you don't want to keep proceeding. There's no doubt you did this. We know she's telling the truth. Just you made the statement that we know that you did cause those injuries. But from my experience, here's what I found why something like this happens. And it's important that you try to maintain that you're doing 99% of the talking. We found, especially in any interrogation, the more silence on your part by you gives that subject the opportunity to either give denials or objections why they wouldn't or couldn't have done it. And you want them listening to what you're saying, not you listening to what they're saying. That was in the interview. Now we're in the interrogation.
Exactly. That's right. There is a subtle shift. And again, in episode 1, you can catch the differences between an interview and interrogation. But really, my friends, at that point, if you are familiar with our material, we're going to be going in much more in depth about how to do an interrogation. But in order to wrap up this episode, I'm going to talk about.
I'm sorry, Frank. One thing
go on.
Is that you made the statement that we know that you did it. What then would you want to bring up to him in our example?
Yeah. So what you would want to do is what we call a transition statement. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a narrative that's going to frame the rest of the interrogation other than a central purpose to get the person to tell me what really happened or to give a confession. I'm going to say, look, we know that you did it, Joey. The only reason I'm talking to you right now is I need to determine why you did it here. And that's where something called theme development is going to come into play, where I'm going to verbally articulate justifications, rationalizations, minimizations, and projections that's going to give the subject a face-saving way to admit to what they did wrong. If you go over there to someone, Dan, and I say, all right, Joey, I know that you did it. you're a sorry drunk and you beat your wife. And you are lying to me about this never happening before because I just got your NCIC back and about blew up the printer and dispatch. I mean, that's not going to, win you any kind of friends. That's not going to win the hearts and minds of the person you're talking to. But let's assume that I get a confession from Joey. I want to go back over as much details as possible. Specifically, I need to be asking myself, okay, what can I get from a search warrant from his confession that will substantiate the confession? And if you're familiar with our work, we have the confessions never the end of the story. I would actually, after I get a confession, you have the advantage of it being freshly committed, road officers. Walk back over to the crime scene. See if you can visually see out there anything that could substantiate what he said. And maybe Joey says, yeah, I got tired of her. She started yelling about how she was sleeping with this other guy. So I went outside. All I was going to do was tell her to stop. And then she was yelling in my face. So I shoved her, she shoved me back, and then I punched her, and then she fell down the stairs. Suppose that's his story. And during the course of this, he knocked over a flower pot. You go over there, you see a flower pot that's knocked over. What's that going to do for his confession? Well, it's going to substantiate it. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely do it. And if you see a bunch of stuff like that, I would, consent to search from your victim, take pictures of everything, tag it into evidence. But I would return later with a search warrant if you are an actual investigator doing a follow-up investigation on that. But once I substantiate the confession, there's little things that you can do. I would put him in the car and I would take him out is what I would do. I would take him to a prison, book him in, do all that.
I think, too, Frank, is that when interrogating a fellow like this is that it's important that you try to establish, at least to him, that you can have an understanding of how something like this could happen.
Exactly.
You would also, in your theme development, speak from past experience in these prior cases about much more serious violence.
Exactly.
Where she has a bloody nose, black eye, and that, but I've dealt with some people that, they take a knife, they take a gun.
Exactly.
And we're not dealing anything like that with you here. And
minimizing,
I don't want people to think that you're a terrible individual. What you did, and you could say this, what you did wasn't right, but I do understand how sometimes people lose their temper. We say things, we do things that normally, under normal circumstances, you would never do. And you think back on things, we all make mistakes, I've made mistakes and that, but it's important that people understand that you're not this vicious individual.
Exactly, yes. That's a wonderful, wonderful, and an example of theme development that we would use on a subject like that. And we could go on and on,
Yes.
with someone on a domestic violence, but to just kind of recap what me and Dan were talking about. Number one is officer safety. Number two is separate the victims, the witnesses, and the suspects. Make sure everyone is not within earshot or eyeshot of one another. And really, if you are a responding officer, my friends, you have those two big advantages. Freshly committed, the evidence a lot of times is right there, and they don't have time to what, Dan? Think of a what? Think of
an alibi.
Bob the Hitman. Bob the Hitman. That's well, you see, I've got this side business. Kind of like a PI, but a little bit more. So again, if you know, you know. If you know, you know, my friends. That's it.
That's right.
Well, so
some of these inside jokes. If you come to attend our seminars,
exactly,
you'll understand a little bit more. But
100%,
yeah.
Well, this will be part one, my friends, of patrol officer response. I think we're going to call this domestic. We may have some other domestics. If you think of anything that you would like, if you have a real-world experience, if you had something break out, and you're like, hey, I wonder how I can apply the Reid technique to this particular type of issue, please let us know. So, Dan, I think this has been a fruitful conversation, my friend.
I think so, Frank. Yeah, I hope they've given a lot of good information, I hope.
Excellent. Yes, I hope so. And if you agree with me, you disagree with me, especially if you disagree. I learn more through disagreements and debate than I do with folks who agree with me all the time. That's why I get along well, so well with Dan over here, because we debate and we argue all the time. So
yeah. Well,
right.
yeah. Even though I'm always right,
Always right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You better be careful. I might be your doctor one day. So.
Oh yeah.
Dan,
Great,
I'll
Frank.
see you.
Thank you, Frank, for all the good information.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay.